Inside the Build, your destination for all things tech.
Hello, welcome to Inside the Build, a podcast sponsored by Experian Technologies. My name is John Ripma, and this program explores the heart behind the application, our weekly series that delves into the intersection of both the technical challenges and the human emotions that often come with a complex project to build custom business software. And we design these conversations for startups, entrepreneurs, small business owners who want to learn more about how to handle the ups and downs of digital software development. Today, we continue our conversation with Chris Shuba, CEO of Helios Quantitative Analysis. And this is the second part in our four-part business case series that focuses on Chris's experience, both emotional and technical, with building a portfolio analysis tool for his clients, which are independent investment advisors. His business proposition provides the services, digital tools, and technology these advisors need to level the playing field as they have to compete every day against the giants of that industry. So, Chris, welcome to this second episode of Inside the Build.
Thank you.
In the last podcast, you told us how you took an idea and ran with it and selected a development partner who happened to be in India. We talked about that. Let's pick up from there. And if you don't mind telling us how your first round, once you did the kickoff meeting and now you're getting ready for coding and all of that, how your first round of coding went when you were just getting your feet on the ground and getting started with that, the pluses and the minuses.
Sure. Well, I can give you my experience from kind of the CEO seat, for lack of a better way of saying it. I mean, obviously, at the time we had some talented folks on our team interacting with the real world day in and day out, blocking and tackling. But from a CEO's seat, the first thing that you go through in a technology build is downloading your brain over to them so they can get a very clear understanding of what you're trying to accomplish. And loosely speaking, those are called your requirements. That's probably the hardest part for most folks, is to really put down on paper what it is you're trying to accomplish in pretty nitty-gritty detail. The great part about, Experian for us, or, a good partner in this space, is they're going to know what you're trying to do and provide a lot of tips and tricks, a lot of suggestions, right? So, if I was going to draw a house that I wanted to build, I might forget to put a window somewhere because I'm just not thinking about windows, right? I know I need windows, but you don't think about every little thing that you have, or which way the window opens, because if the window opens this way and the door opens this way on the outside, you hit your window, type of stuff. So they have the expertise to really intuit what you're trying to accomplish and then provide their input on, well, here's how maybe this should really go. And the more detailed those requirements are, the better you get the more you get what you want in the end. And I think that's the journey from this idea of what you want to accomplish in a system that you've made up in your mind that accomplishes it. Now you're getting into the brass tacks. And some people make that transition really easily. We didn't have a problem with that because we're analytic by nature. Some folks really struggle with this. And if you are one of those people that struggles with it, take your time. Even before, like I said in the last podcast, take your time up front to really be able to explain what you want to do. It makes everything so much better.
Yeah.
And then, you asked the question I probably gave you too much setup on, and that is, what was it like moving into code? Well, from those requirements, then you're basically going to get mock-ups. You're going to get non-functioning sketches, for lack of a better way, of what they think your requirements are. And again, that's that feedback loop. That's the iterative process. And once those are approved, then you get into code. And code is lined out generally in sprints or sections that are completed and approved, and they kind of roll on each other. But by then it's really kind of real. You're kind of settled in. You start seeing the thing come to life, and it's exciting. It's also where you start to notice things that you wish were different, right? And you start
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
create, the next upgrade in your mind. So, getting into code and all of that is really not scary. It's not that big a deal as you get it right on the front end. Where all the regret
Yeah.
or problems exist is when you don't take that upfront time. It
Yeah.
always comes back to that.
Yeah. When you think about product engineering, all right,
Mhm.
which is not just you got a code, got a guy who's a real sharp coder, a data guru, so to speak, and
Mhm.
he's sitting in a dark room with a single light bulb hanging over his
Watching The
head.
Matrix.
Yeah,
Yeah.
watching the Matrix, listen to, heavy metal music, and you slide
Mhm.
pizzas under the door at midnight. You know, this is, obviously that's not what you wanted, but um, here, you're working with a partner that's bringing engineering processes into play. So, Mike, and you mentioned something that I think really kind of plays into this question, and that is that when you're dealing with a company that's very process oriented, did you ever feel like that they weren't flexible? That, like you said, you would see something that would be maybe for the next phase or something like that, but that you could also see something that, wait a minute, I did forget. I wanted the window over here, but I can see right now that that's too close to the door or whatever.
Mhm.
And so that, even though there's been a lot of, let's say, water under the bridge, so to speak, but with the engineering process in full bloom, did you ever feel like you were stuck in sort of a rigid loop and you couldn't get out of it and you just had to play it out to the end, even though it's not what you wanted?
No, I mean, I would replace the word flexible with collaborative, right?
Oh.
At its core, building technology with a partner is a collaborative process. It's not a magic wand. And
Hmm.
where problems, I think, happen most in this is when, someone in my seat, again, doesn't want to put in the time or doesn't really have a final vision of what they're trying to get to. And and then it ends up being, maybe not exactly what they want. So in that scenario, even when you have someone super detailed and creates a lot of great requirements up front, in a collaborative environment, in this case, Experian is going to come back with their thoughts, their feelings, and your expertise about your industry, what you want, might be like, yeah, I know what you're saying, but I really want that window to open this way because of X, Y, or Z. And they'll make the window open the way you want to, right? So it is always a collaborative environment. Um, the struggle comes when um, the combination of if the collaborative environment is unequal, someone is, it's got to be a matching equation. I'm
Hmm.
probably saying this poorly, but in the times where we have been faced with choices we've had to make that we really didn't anticipate because you get really in the weeds of a system and they're like, do you want A or B? You know, um, we've had to grow and expand what we're capable of as a strategic thinking company or understanding our clients or understanding future processes that maybe we don't have right now and take that time to come back to them because it is collaborative, it is flexible, but maybe more than some people want, I guess is what I'm getting at. You at the end of the day are going to have to make the call, and even despite their capabilities.
Yeah, yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I believe that is the collaborative process.
Mhm.
Um, and as you get into any build, you do get a whole lot as it goes further and further along. That if you have to make a change, sometimes you have to back way up, into a corner in a way that you don't want to go into because it's in order to make this happen, you've got to go re-engineer something that you engineered a long time ago, which adds more to it. But hopefully, working in those 2 week sprints, I think you mentioned, you're able to catch those kinds of things, I would think, before you get too far down the road. and then you do have kind of a problem on your hand because you could have fixed it when it was easy to fix. Now it's going to be hard to fix. But
Right.
sounds like
And
those
cost comes into
sprints
play.
and
Cost comes
cost
into play.
come
It's something
absolutely, yeah. You can
that's
fix
something else
anything.
something else I should mention there is that the more work you do up front, the less it costs you in the end. So if you need motivation to do the work up front, that's it. Because rework or scope changes cost money.
Hmm.
And that's also something too that I'll kind of throw out to you is that be really clear with yourself on what's most important to you. Obviously, the quality of the system running is going to be the most important thing. But if you're a person who really needs something to look a certain way, which is how I am, you're going to have to spend some money on UX and UI design help, either through your partner like Experian or outside of that to get what you want, right? If you don't have that resource you've brought in, you don't want to pay for it, then you have to do it. And you might not be that great of a graphic designer, kind of a thing. So harnessing upfront, just being honest with yourself about what's really important to you and making sure that's part of your budget, even if it's a little bit painful. If you don't do that, when you get the finished product, you're probably going to get let down for the things that are important to you that are again outside of the fundamental quality of the product itself, which your tech partner is going to make sure that happens.
Yeah, yeah. So, you brought up something, and this is personal to you, really, Chris.
Mhm.
What were the personal demands on you,
Mhm.
that required your personal resources in order to participate in the project, of course, but also to ensure that your vision was being executed, built the way you wanted it. So, from a time standpoint, from a aggravation standpoint, from an emotional standpoint,
Mhm.
what were the costs that you experienced beyond just the financial
Mhm.
that you experienced during the build? If you can think back a couple of years to remember what that was like.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we said the word cost a few times here. I actually tend to look at it more as like an investment, right? I
Mhm.
want to invest a certain amount of money and get a certain return out of it. And that's why you're building the tech. And it's certainly been that way for us. But at the time, it feels like cost, right? Um, from my seat as someone who was not in all of the day-to-day meetings as it related, in this case with Experian, um, the cost or the toll, so to speak, that it takes on someone like me who's fairly type A is you do lose a little bit of control. Once you set your requirements and you turn your team loose and their team loose, they're off working and doing things and you're not in it, right? So keeping tabs on it from afar, it was a little bit hard for me to
Yeah.
kind of stay
Yeah.
out of it a little bit. I mean, everyone's a little bit different, but the the way that I did it, and I certainly do it now because we continue to build software. I wish I'd done a better job of it in the very beginning. So I'll give you guys a little bit of tips here on the web or the vidcast here is, you know, as I already mentioned before, setting your requirements up front, but then also with your team setting success criteria that are higher level and more outcome based than detailed, requirements that make a software program go. And that way, I feel like there's an alignment within my organization around what we're really trying to get to, right? So that if a requirement combination isn't really getting us to the success criteria, that we know then to pivot, right?
Hmm.
Because otherwise,
Hmm.
if you just march
Yep.
towards checking boxes of these requirements that have been made, the combination of them might not really be the experience that you want for your user, right? And so managing through success criteria, making sure that everyone feels enabled to raise the flag um, if they don't feel like a success criteria is being met, all that starts with really good requirements up front, and then having your team have that feature. It really does bring down that personal cost, but it's going to be time. Um, there's going to be deadlines.
Hmm.
It's work, right? But it's exciting work in my opinion because you're creating something cool that didn't exist before. So um, it's not just send an email and 6 months later, software shows up, you got to do it. But the more command and control that you have within your own organization, the more that people really get what you're trying to accomplish at the high level, the more that problems will get sniffed out. And the real pain point is a problem.
Yeah.
Is is
Yeah.
that's the pain when something breaks, something doesn't go right. You're like, okay, we just spent all this money and I don't like this. You
Hmm.
want to do everything you can to avoid that. And we've had it happen. That's life. It's going to happen in your build. It might
Right.
not be major, but it's going to happen. So,
Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely good advice. But it's also good advice in the sense that the the keeping the beginning in mind, as you're working through the ups and downs and the problems as you're going through there, keep the vision in the forefront. What
mhm.
it's going to look like is very important. It's very easy to get kind of knocked off and uh, go through the process and start changing your mind a little bit to accommodate things, and compromising here and compromising there, and all of a sudden you end up where I didn't mean to end up here. So
Mhm.
being able to using the system, using the engineering process, that's one thing I think the engineering process does, is it kind of forces you, if you're going to make a change, you really have to look all the way back to the beginning. That if I'm going to
Mhm.
make this change today from an engineering standpoint, I've got to actually look all the way back, because there's a lot of connections that are dependent on this. So,
Mhm.
but let's do a little Dr. Phil here, if you're
Okay.
game, okay?
Sure.
So, how important and how big a deal is it for you as the CEO and the person who is paying for this to have patience and trust and confidence in between you and the developers, and between you and your staff, who's operating for you, kind of like in between you, the visionary, and the developers? Um, how important is patience, trust, and confidence?
Mhm.
How important was that during the build, and even today? Things are still moving forward. So address that. Do the Dr. Phil thing for me, and
Mhm.
just bare your soul here.
Um, Well, I'll break them into pieces. I think trust and confidence is one conversation, and patience is another, right? So, once you get working with your tech partner, once we began working with Experian, you almost tend to think of them like employees, right?
Mhm.
They're not your employees, but they're part of your team, right? And so part of the selection process is, do I trust and have confidence in these people? It's kind of like an interview, right? Same thing when I hire
Yeah.
someone. So I don't think working with a tech partner requires any additional leap of faith than just hiring employees to do it. So that's why you do the interview process. It's why you make sure that they're the right fit. So I don't put too much emotion around that piece of it. If you are somebody who has problems with kind of the trust and confidence end of things, that just means that your team needs to put more work into um, really understanding and having your own resources around what they're building, on how they're building it, where it's being stored, et cetera, so that if for some reason you decide you're going to switch providers at some point, you have control of everything.
Hmm.
That's a lot more work on
Right.
your team than having them do it or do it in duplicate. But there are ways that if you really have, kind of trust or confidence issues, that you can maintain a ton of control in the process, so to speak. Um, on the patient's end of things, that is reality. So, if you're a typical CEO or, a business leader of some sort in management, you want things now. And the reality of it is that building good tech is not a now thing. It takes time. And it's going to be directly reflective of, like we've already talked about 1,000 times here, how much work is put in on the front end, right? How collaborative you are and ready to make decisions and review, your side of things. Um, and then, it does come down to budget. How many people can you
Hmm.
throw at a problem?
Hmm.
How many work streams can you be working on at one time? So there's a lot of levers that can determine how fast you're going to go. most of them are going to be on your end, right? In terms of your team's ability to collaborate and set expectations and upfront and spend. Um, on their end of things, speaking, because my experiences with Experian, see how that rhymes there? Or it doesn't rhyme. What is
I
that?
see it.
Alliteration? I don't know what it's called.
It's a
Anyway,
beautiful thing. Yeah.
that is, they're going to do things in a very process-oriented professional way, even when it makes me mad, right? So, I might say, well, hey, I need this thing built. And they say, great, we're going to build it, but we also have to go through peer review. We have to document how we did it. We're going to do it to these code standards, and it's going to take, 2 weeks. And I'm like, no, I want it tomorrow. Um, but that's part of, you're never going to regret doing it the right way first. But sometimes in our seat, you just want to go faster. It's just not going to happen. Tech is not fast. Good tech is not fast. So, the more that you can internalize that, the better.
Yeah. Yeah. A good tech is not fast. I think
Mhm.
that's it's like that old saying, you can have people say, I want it good, fast, and cheap.
Yep.
And the answer is, well, you can have one or two, but you can't have all three.
Right.
No such thing as good, fast, and cheap.
There is relative good, relative fast, and relative cheap. And if you, like I said, if you do the things that we're kind of talking about here, you will get the tech you want at a reasonable time at a reasonable price. If you do it the right way, right? It's a good process. It's a really good process. There's no such thing as a perfect
Yes.
process.
Right,
But
right, right,
the
right.
reality of it is that driving, CEOs with a right now mentality are always going to have to be patient in one form or the other.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah.
And you can replace the word reasonable with expected, an expected
Mhm.
time frame, an expected cost, and an
Yep.
expected quality. All of that meets expectations. And so, yeah, that's what we strive for in the beginning and with the process. So, well, I'll
Mhm.
tell you what, Chris, we're coming to the end of this podcast. So once again,
Mhm.
thank you for your time, your wisdom, your experience, sharing it with everybody. It's a valuable thing, very valuable to hear, from the horse's mouth, so to speak, what your experience has been like. So
Mhm.
definitely appreciate it. And until we meet again, thank you.